Chapter 1267. With one sword, the White-Bone Sword Emperor was defeated miserably. The omniscient manifestation didn't contain space-time profound, but the five elements profound. Although the five elements profound wasn't as illusory and unavoidable as the space-time profound, it was the most complicated. The five elements reinforced and restrained each other, circulating endlessly. The five elements were the ultimate mutually reinforcing profundities. For example, space-time, yin and yang, light and darkness, as well as the four images, were all composed of two or four kinds of profounds. Only the five elements had five mutually restraining profundities, which made them the most complicated and unfathomable. The omniscient manifestation contained the five elements profound had reached the pinnacle in terms of transformations. Even the White-Bone Sword Emperor, who was proficient in space-time profound, couldn't dodge it. Normally, he could distort space-time and easily escape from the attack's range. Unfortunately, his opponent was Yi Chun, a genius with peerless comprehension. It wasn't without reason that the sovereign of the three realms chose Yi Chun. If it was someone else, such as the Golden Robe Emperor or the Purple Robe Emperor, although they were talented enough and much stronger than Yi Chun, they couldn't completely inherit the essence of his martial arts. The inheritance of a legendary sovereign wasn't something that just anyone could inherit. What kind of sword art is this? I can't even see it clearly. If you can see it clearly, you'll have a chance to dodge. It's precisely because you can't see it clearly that you can't dodge it. So powerful. In just a few hundred years, he was able to grasp such a terrifying sword art. The Sword Emperor's position is definitely his. In the eyes of the crowd, Yi Chun's sword was extremely frightening. One had to know that at their level, there were very few things that they couldn't see clearly under the sovereign level. And Yi Chun's sword art was precisely what they couldn't see clearly. I wonder if my Huang Jinyuan can block it. The Golden Robe Emperor smiled bitterly. In terms of offensive methods, Yi Chun had left him far behind. Huang Jinyuan was the strongest defensive martial art of the Golden Sovereign, and it could even protect one's soul. However, this sword was extremely extraordinary. With his Huang Jinyuan realm, the chances of him blocking it were not high. He reckoned that he would still be able to find a loophole. White-Bone Sword Emperor, use your sword burial art in the upcoming war between humans and demons. Yi Chun didn't plan to do anything to the White-Bone Sword Emperor. Defeating it was enough. The White-Bone Sword Emperor glanced at Yi Chun, then fled with a dark expression. He found a secluded place and began to heal his wounds. Yi Chun's sword attack had injured him quite a bit. Even if the latter had stopped in time, the reason why he was in such a hurry to heal was because he couldn't afford to lose face. It would be a lie to say that he didn't hate Yi Chun, but he also knew that whoever's fist was bigger would be the truth. Sword burial art. What an amazing sword art. Yi Chun rejoiced in his heart. The White-Bone Sword Emperor had given him a lot of inspiration, especially the sword burial art. After a round of fighting, Yi Chun had already grasped 50% of the essence of the sword burial art. With this, he could easily create another sword burial art. The martial arts in the world were as vast as the sea of stars. There was no martial art that was truly invincible, unless it surpassed the others. Therefore, an additional unique sword art meant an additional method. For example, the omniscient nature might seem powerful, but if the opponent was equally powerful in transformation, the omniscient nature's use would be limited. At that time, the sword burial art would be more useful than the omniscient nature, and vice versa. The exit of the sovereign sacred ground is open. At this moment, a whirlpool in the air started to spin. This was the exit of the sovereign sacred ground. Let's go. This time, I must enter seclusion for a few thousand years to digest the inheritance. There were many inheritances in the sovereign sacred ground. When the time was right, even if one's strength was insufficient, they could still obtain the inheritance. In just a short while, there were only a few people left in the sovereign sacred ground. Yi Chun, I hope that we can meet again in the human-devil battlefield in the future. Dugaju left. Just like his character, he would never say a word more. Flowers bloom and wilt. Every time we meet, you always bring me a shock. I believe the next time will be no exception. Dantai Minghua smiled faintly. She was like a bright moon, entering the whirlpool. Dantai Mingyue was an ethereal girl. As time passed, she became more and more similar to Yan Qingxian in certain aspects. They were both so ethereal. Perhaps they were the same person in their previous life. But in this life, they had become two different people, experiencing two different lives. This battle was very exciting. It also let me see a glorious tomorrow. Chu Zhongtian's eyes were full of longing and battle intent. He was different from others. Others pursued the peak of strength, but he also pursued strength and battle. Therefore, he would not be discouraged. Although the result was important, the process was the most exciting. One by one they left. In the end, only the golden-robed emperor was left. Yichen, where are you going? Seclusion? The golden-robed emperor asked. Yichen nodded. It's time. The essence of the three realms supreme's martial arts was like boiling water, rolling around in his mind. If he didn't go into seclusion now, he would waste a lot of inspiration. Me too. The golden-robed emperor nodded and smiled. How about this 500 years? After 500 years, if you all come out, we will meet at the White Tiger Starfield's Horizon Star. The Horizon Planet was a relatively famous level 7 life planet in the White Tiger Starfield. Many people liked to gather on the Horizon Planet because there were countless beautiful sceneries on the planet. Okay, see you in 500 years. 500 years should be enough. If even 500 years was not enough, then even 10,000 years would be too little. After all, there was a limit to the Quasi-Supreme. After leaving the Supreme Holy Land, the three returned to Planet Flame. Now the entire Planet Flame belonged to Yichen. Although Flame Star was only a level 3 planet, it was not small. There were many places suitable for cultivation and seclusion. Of course, Su Jing would not go into seclusion on Planet Flame. Only in the Dragon Clan could she make full progress. After staying on Planet Flame for a while, Su Jing returned to Planet Azure Dragon. Your foundation is too weak. In the following time, besides digesting the inheritance, don't forget to build your foundation. Hand in hand, Yi Chun and Morong Qingqing walked on a path covered with fireworks. This was Flame Star's most famous fire path. Now it was monopolized by Yi Chun. Only those with his permission could enter. Yeah, I know. But you don't need to worry. Rose Supreme's inheritance is very special. It pays great attention to the foundation. Morong Qingqing nodded and walked hand in hand with Yi Chun on the fire path. She felt very peaceful. However, if she wanted to accompany Yi Chun to the peak, a peaceful life was impossible. For her, this moment was like an eternity. In the beginning, Yi Chun's seclusion frequency was very high. After coming out, he would immediately practice sword arts, and then go back to seclusion. As the three realms supreme's martial arts became more and more profound, Yi Chun's seclusion time grew longer and longer. The longest time he stayed was 30 years, and the longest time he came out was no more than a month. As for his parents and family, Yi Chun no longer had to worry about them. Not long ago, the upper echelons of the human race sent an envoy and gave Yi Chun a jade box. Inside the jade box were 2 life and death fruits. After taking the fruits, his parents smoothly broke through to life and death realm, increasing their lifespan to 100,000 years. As for his younger siblings, they had also broken through to life and death realm a long time ago. Without any worries, Yi Chun had nothing else to worry about, so he threw himself into training wholeheartedly. Chapter 1268. In the blink of an eye, 50 years had passed. Yi Chun's foundation had become more and more stable, and his cultivation base had reached late 8th layer. His body contained boundless sword yuan. At the 8th layer, every small realm required a large amount of accumulation. If one's foundation was weak, it would be difficult to continue breaking through. One had to settle down and train hard. 150 years ago, because Yi Chun had forcibly helped Morong Qingqing break through to the 8th layer, Morong Qingqing's foundation was not very stable. She was still at early 8th layer. However, according to Morong Qingqing, she would be able to break through soon. Presumably, Rose Supreme's inheritance had brought her a lot of benefits. Yi Chun's seclusion was not in a city, but in one of Flame Star's danger zones, Flame Ocean Forest. The Flame Sea Forest was a mystical place. The trees here were all spirit trees, and they were all fire attribute spirit trees. Every now and then these trees would burn. Countless trees would burn, and it would look like a burning sea of fire. This was how the Flame Sea Forest got its name. In the center of Flame Ocean Forest, the burning trees suddenly froze. Then, the flames instantly extinguished, and the trees immediately withered. Although my sword burial art is different from White Bone Sword Emperor's, its profoundness should be several times stronger than his. Just now, Yi Chen had only released the sword aura of sword burial art. He didn't actually practice sword arts. Otherwise, the entire Flame Ocean Forest might have disappeared. With Yi Chen's current strength, he could also cause great damage to life planets. But Supreme could destroy life planets. However, the true sword burial art requires the scene of falling petals to be considered to have reached the next level. The upper echelon of the human race didn't just send over 2 life and death fruits. They also sent over a peerless martial art manual. There were countless peerless martial arts recorded in it, and each peerless martial art had either a detailed or simple introduction. The sword burial art was one of the peerless sword arts, and its creator was Paragon Flower Burial. As for the 3 realms killing fist, it was naturally recorded in it as well. Flower burial, sword burial. Yi Chen carefully comprehended. In the blink of an eye, another 10 years passed. Yi Chen, do you dare to fight? On this day, a loud roar reverberated throughout the entirety of Planet Flame. A ripple appeared in spacetime. Another person has come to challenge Master. In Sparkle City, a young man raised his head. He was one of the top 4 disciples of Yi Chen, Yin Jianhui. In the past hundreds of years, he had already reached the 7th sky of life and death realm. Among the human geniuses, he was not that outstanding, but he was not bad either. Ever since Master became the Sword Queen, a Sword Dao Emperor has come to challenge him every 10 years. I wonder what kind of big shot it will be this time. Dongfang Bai smiled. Among the 4 disciples of Yi Chen, Lung Xinghan had been wandering outside all year round and rarely came back. Huang Sume was married, so she rarely came back. The last time she came back, it was to visit Yi Chen with her husband. Only Dongfang Bai and Yin Jianhui spent most of their time on the Flame Star. Occasionally they would go out. It's finally here. I hope the opponent this time is a bit stronger and can give me some inspiration. In Flame Forest, Yi Chen's figure flickered as he flew toward the source of the voice. In the void near the Flame Star, a tall and sturdy middle-aged man with a huge sword on his back stood there. As he opened his eyes, sword light shot out in all directions, making him look like a peerless ominous sword. Fierce Sword Emperor, 50,000 years old. He was once a Sword Dao Emperor on the quasi-sovereign list. Swish! A blue figure suddenly appeared. It was indeed Yi Chen. You are Yi Chen? Fierce Sword Emperor sized up Yi Chen. Indeed you are? Yi Chen nodded inwardly. From the other's temperament, he should be an expert. Although he was not as good as White Bone Sword Emperor, he should not be too boring. Yining. But people usually call me Fierce Sword Emperor. Ferocious Sword Emperor's expression turned serious. He could sense an intense danger from Yi Chen's body. Make your move. Yi Chen stood with his hands behind his back. Then you have to be careful. Fierce Sword Emperor pulled out the huge sword on his back, and the sword aura on his body continued to rise. Because the sword aura was too powerful, all the life and death kings within billions of li could feel it. What? It's still rising? The evil Sword Emperor's sword aura seemed to be endless. Even after 15 minutes, he was still climbing, which made all the life and death realm warriors watching the battle on the planet dumbfounded. They couldn't help but worry for Yi Chen. It seems to be a Sword Dao secret art. Yi Chen remained unmoved, allowing Fierce Sword Emperor to increase his sword aura. According to his speculation, the reason why Fierce Sword Emperor's sword aura could rise for such a long time was because he cultivated a Sword Dao secret art that could increase sword aura. After a quarter of an hour, Fierce Sword Emperor's sword aura reached its peak. At this moment, several hundred li around him seemed to have turned into a pitch-black tornado. It was a sword aura, an extremely ferocious and violent sword aura. Although you didn't interrupt my sword aura, I'm not going to be lenient. Fierce Sword Emperor didn't have much confidence before, but now, he was much more confident. Whatever tricks you have, just use them all. Yi Chen said indifferently. I hope you can remain this calm from now on. Kill. With a roar, Fierce Sword Emperor charged toward Yi Chen along with his sword. When he was still several thousand li away from Yi Chen, Fierce Sword Emperor furiously slashed out. The ghostly wails and wolf-like howls rang out. Even though they were very far away, it still made the life and death kings on the flame star tremble with fear. Dongfang Bai and Yin Jianhui exchanged a glance, their eyes also filled with fear. What kind of sword art was this? How could it be so frightening? Oh, it contains life and death profound. Yi Chen could tell with a single glance that Fierce Sword Emperor's sword art contained life and death profound. Once the life and death profound was perfected, the martial skill created would also be a supreme martial skill, and an extremely frightening one at that. If the enemy's spirit was weak, and their will was weak, they wouldn't even need to fight before their fighting spirit would be directly destroyed. Unfortunately, it's useless for me. I don't intend to study life and death profound at the moment. A person's energy was limited. Once Yi Chen completely digested the essence of the Three Realms Supreme's martial skills, he would perhaps study life and death profound martial skills. But not now. Your luck is not bad. Have a taste of sword burial art. In the past 60 years, Yi Chen had never used sword burial art. This was the first time. Raising his right hand's index and middle fingers, Yi Chen pointed at Fierce Sword Emperor. The wind stopped, and so did Fierce Sword Emperor's sword aura. 1, 2 several petals fell from the void, looking so beautiful and sorrowful. Fierce Sword Emperor's eyes were filled with disbelief, as if someone had grabbed his neck. Even after Yi Chen left, Fierce Sword Emperor still had lingering fear. This sword was countless times more frightening than his fierce sword. At that moment, he even had the thought of suicide. Frightening Sword Emperor. Deeply looking at the place where Yi Chen disappeared, Fierce Sword Emperor turned around and flew away. In this life, he didn't intend to challenge Yi Chen anymore. The title of Sword Emperor could be taken by anyone, and it had nothing to do with him. Chapter 1269. When using the burial sword art, the more petals there were, the more profound the burial sword art was. According to the records, when Supreme Burial Flower used the burial sword art, there were hundreds of petals. Yi Chen naturally couldn't compare to Supreme Burial Flower. When he used the burial sword art, there were only 4 or 5 petals. However, this was already very frightening. Back then, the White Bone Sword Emperor's burial sword art was far inferior to Yi Chen's, and could only be considered superficial. Time flew by, and 40 years passed in the blink of an eye. 5 elements sword arts are broad and profound. Before, my foundation was not enough, and the 5 elements sword arts I created were very immature. Now that I have the essence of the Three Realms Supreme's martial skills, it's enough to greatly improve the 5 elements sword arts. Be it in terms of profoundness or power, the burial sword art had already far surpassed the 5 elements sword arts. Yi Chen naturally couldn't favor one over the other. He wanted to make the 5 elements sword art into an even more powerful sword art, a super sword art that focused both offense and defense. First was a defensive sword art. Yi Chen was prepared to fuse the rise and fall sword art into this defensive sword art. After all, although rise and fall sword art was exquisite, it could only weaken the enemy's attack. In terms of defense, it was still quite lacking. If he could fuse it with the defensive sword art, weakening while defending, it would undoubtedly make the enemy despair. Of course, the prerequisite was to first create a defensive sword art, and then fuse it. Qingxian, come and attack me. In the starry sky far away from Planet Flame, Yi Chen and Yin Qingxian faced each other. Yin Qingshuan's visit was something Yi Chen didn't expect, even though she only came to see Yin Fengfeng and the disciples of the mysterious sect. At this time, Yi Chen had just created a 5 elements defensive sword art. With Yin Qingshuan's strength, it couldn't be better for her to test out a defensive sword art. Alright. Yin Qingxian nodded. For the first attack, Yin Qingxian used a palm art. The palm art was ethereal and swift, containing the profound of yin and yang. Puff. However, the moment this palm technique came into contact with Yi Chen's defensive sword technique, it immediately collapsed. For the second attack, Yan Qingxian didn't use a normal martial art. Instead, it was a sealing martial art. This sealing martial art was called Yin-Yang Destruction Mirror. Yi Chen felt the time and space around him change. In the next second, he appeared in a black and white world. The black and white air flowed continuously, and eventually turned into a Tai Chi. From the outside, it looked like a yin-yang mirror had appeared in the starry sky. Bang! The yin-yang mirror shattered and disappeared. Amazing, first sealing the enemy, then annihilating the enemy along with the seal. How could Yi Chen not see through the profoundness of this move? If it were an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to do anything. However, the 5 elements defensive sword art could defend against it. Yan Qingxian couldn't instantly seal Yi Chen, so she could only seal the time and space where Yi Chen was. Therefore, Yi Chen could still use sword arts. Seeing that even the yin-yang destruction mirror couldn't break Yi Chen's defensive sword art, Yan Qingxian knew that she had to use her true power. In these 100 years after leaving the supreme sacred land, she had already digested a portion of Old Man Heaven's will's martial essence. The remaining ones were more profound, and she couldn't digest them with her current realm. She could only leave them for later. This life and death heaven, will palm of mine, took me 100 years to create. Be careful. Besides the yin and yang profound, Yan Qingxian was also proficient in life and death profound. Life and death heaven will palm? Yi Chen looked pensive. Swoosh. It was only a single movement, but Yan Qingxuan's entire aura had changed completely. Her life force was vibrating intensely, dropping to the lowest point one moment, and then rising to the highest point the next. There was a kind of unpredictable aura of life and death. Besides that, Yi Chen also sensed a familiar power. That was heart power. He didn't expect Yan Qingxian to have comprehended heart power. Old Man Heaven's will capturing hand was similar to Paragon of 3 Realms killing fist. They both contained heart power. The difference was that Paragon of 3 Realms had completely integrated heart power into his fist art, increasing its power. As for Old Man Heaven's will, he used his heart to replace Heaven's heart, increasing his technique. Swoosh, swoosh. Before Yan Qingxian waved her palm, there were already 2 palm winds flying towards Yi Chen. These palm winds were extremely powerful, and contained the power of life and death. A barren planet nearby was merely brushed by the palm winds, and it immediately turned into dust as though it had been eroded by the wind. An even further broken planet suddenly erupted with boundless vitality, and when the vitality reached the limit, it exploded violently. Extreme life was death. Extreme death was nothingness. As for Yi Chen's 5-element sword art, there was an imperceptible pause. It seems like I have to go all out. Yi Chen had never underestimated Yan Qingxian. In Elysium, she didn't put all her focus on martial arts, and was involved in many aspects. One should know that a person's energy was limited, and it was impossible to be number one in all aspects. However, there were benefits to being involved in too many aspects, and that was comprehending by analogy. Now it was time for Yan Qingxian to explode. Her improvement speed even shocked Yi Chen. Go! Accumulating her palm to the limit, Yan Qingxian slowly struck out with her right hand. Hoo 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 hoo. The overlapping palm winds were either real or fake, and they covered the sky and covered Yi Chen. It was impossible for Yi Chen to dodge them. Of course, he didn't need to dodge them. This time, he was testing the defense of 5-element sword art. Life and death were similar to the rise and fall of times. 5-element sword art started to become unstable. Occasionally, the palm winds would suddenly erupt, and it was impossible to grasp its pattern. Pop! In the end, Yi Chen's 5-element sword art collapsed. Of course, Yan Qingxuan's life and death heaven's will palm had reached its limit, and it could only push Yi Chen thousands of miles away. In terms of using heart power, Yan Qingxian was still not as good as Yi Chen. Otherwise, she wouldn't have pushed Yi Chen thousands of miles away. She would have been able to hurt Yi Chen more or less. Congratulations. In the future war between humans and demons, I hope we can fight together. Yi Chen smiled and flew over. Of course. Yan Qingxian nodded. After staying in Flame Star for a year, Yan Qingxian left. During this year, Yi Chen had completely perfected 5-element sword art. What he needed to do next was to fuse the 5-element sword art and rise and fall of 5-element sword art together to create a more ultimate 5-element sword art. Yi Chen had a premonition that this would be a huge project, and it would be many times more difficult than the sword burial art. But once it was created, Yi Chen's overall strength would skyrocket. 30 years passed. 80 years passed. In the blink of an eye, 200 years had passed since he left Supreme Sacred Land. Too difficult. I haven't even reached half of it. The difficulty of fusing the 5-element sword art and rise and fall of 5-element sword art was beyond Yi Chen's imagination. The 5-element profoundness contained in the 5-element sword art was very stable, but the 5-element profoundness contained in the rise and fall of 5-element sword art focused on changes in levels. The two couldn't be reconciled to a certain extent. If Yi Chen didn't have the martial arts essence of the Three Realms Paragon, he would have given up long ago. Chapter 1270. When he couldn't figure it out, Yi Chen would practice other sword arts. In these 80 years, the sword burial art had risen from 4 or 5 petals to over a dozen petals. And in terms of variations, Yi Chen could instantly slash out 999,990 swords, making boundless phenomenon even more unfathomable. As for Death Cleave, Yi Chen had gone through over 100 modifications and had erased over 3,000 flaws. As for how many flaws there were, Yi Chen didn't know. All he knew was that as his sword art boundary rose, he would see more and more flaws. This wasn't the beginning nor was it the end. Fused sword arts, sword burial art, boundless phenomenon, Death Cleave, and 5-element slash. 5 different sword arts were perfected one after another. Faintly, Yi Chen could already see the road to becoming a supreme being. Demon Region God Bless Planet. God Bless Planet was a life planet that the high-level demons bestowed upon the God Bless Queen. It wasn't originally called God Bless Planet, but that wasn't important. What was important was that it was now called God Bless Planet. The God Bless Queen was no longer the God Bless Queen, but the God Blessed Empress. Ever since she left the land of divinity and demons, she had already defeated numerous quasi-exalts of the demons. Her reputation had skyrocketed, and she was one of the 5 young quasi-exalts of the demons. She was ranked 2nd on the quasi-exalt ranking. The Celestial Demon Sovereign ranked 5th. The Four-Winged Dragon Sovereign ranked 12th. The Wolf Sovereign ranked 12th. And the Heaven-Swallowing Demon Sovereign ranked 18th. However, she wasn't satisfied with her current achievements. She was well aware that Yi Chen's progress wouldn't be any slower than hers. In the high-level hunting grounds, the impression that Yi Chen gave her was far too deep. If she didn't defeat him, she would never be able to erase it. Vast and boundless golden wings spread out. With a gentle flap, the God-blessed Empress instantly vanished from God-blessed Planet. Heaven-Swallowing Star. The high-level demons bestowed this life planet to the Heaven-Swallowing Demon Sovereign. On this day, endless darkness covered most of Heaven-Swallowing Star, causing the countless demons on Heaven-Swallowing Star to fall into an unprecedented panic. Some demon kings who hadn't seen the world even thought that the demon sovereign had arrived. God bless Empress, what do you mean? A loud roar pierced through the 9 heavens. Next, a figure shot out from the largest city of the Heaven-Swallowing Star. At first, it was just a black dot, but very quickly, the black dot turned into a giant that was 100,000 miles in size. His belly was especially big, and his eyes were like the sun and moon. His roar was like thunder, and there was an iron ring on each of his earlobes. Heaven-devouring demon monarch, it's nothing much. I just want to exchange a few moves with you. The clear and melodious voice was devoid of any emotion. Since you're overestimating yourself, I'll fulfill your wish. Follow me to the Heaven-devouring ruins. The Heaven-devouring ruins was a ruin tens of billions of miles away from the Heaven-devouring planet, and it was also under the control of the Heaven-devouring Devil Emperor. The commotion caused by the battle between the two was too great, and only the Heaven-devouring ruins was suitable as a battlefield. With a teleportation, the two arrived at the Heaven-devouring ruins. Withdrawing her wings, the God-blessed Empress stood on a piece of floating debris. The aura on her body was vast and sacred. She did not look like someone from the demons at all. but more like a messenger from God. Meanwhile, the heaven-devouring demon monarch did not shrink his body size, and he still maintained the size of 100,000 miles. His title was the heaven-devouring demon monarch. The bigger his body size, the more advantage he had. God bless Empress, it has only been 200 years, and you can't help but challenge me. It seems like the consecutive victories have clouded your intelligence. Don't forget that I've even fought with the wolf monarch before. The wolf monarch that he spoke of was the wolf monarch ranked 12th on the quasi-venerable list. He was definitely a ruthless character. The stronger you are, the happier I'll be. Enough with the nonsense. Let's fight. The God bless Empress did not have the time to waste with the heaven-devouring demon monarch. What she wanted was a battle. She wanted the comprehension and experience that the battle would bring. Martial arts that had not been tempered could only be seen and not used. The golden wings spread out again. This time, the wings did not extend to the horizon, and only expanded to about 100 meters. Together with her slender and graceful body, she looked like a goddess. She put her hands together, and circles of golden rings of light rushed out. These golden rings of light were like ripples, expanding continuously. When they got close to the heaven-devouring demon monarch, they had already enveloped the sky and the ground. Heaven-devouring roar. The heaven-devouring demon monarch took a deep breath. This breath was very intense, and even the golden rings of light wavered. Tornadoes were sucked into the heaven-devouring demon monarch's mouth. At the next moment, the heaven-devouring demon monarch's face flushed red, and he let out a deafening roar. The golden rings of light shattered inch by inch. Heaven-devouring demon monarch, have a taste of the light and darkness fist that I've prepared for you. The golden wings on her back flapped, and the God bless Empress's speed instantly reached the speed of light. She disdained teleportation. Although teleportation was faster than the speed of light, it couldn't increase her might. At their level, teleportation was useless at times. What was needed was a fair and square attack. Like an aurora cutting across the starry sky, the God bless Empress punched out. This punch wasn't dazzling, but it wasn't dim either. It was maintained at a perfect balance, as if the purest light and the purest darkness were fused together. Heaven-devouring earth. The heaven-devouring demon monarch felt an unprecedented threat. The light and darkness fist from the God bless Empress wasn't particularly flashy, but it was undoubtedly very close to the truth of the world. The four ultimacies of earth, water, fire, and wind were operating, and the heaven-devouring demon monarch performed his ultimate move, heaven-devouring earth. A small black hole appeared. No matter how small a black hole was, it was still a black hole. To a certain extent, this was the technique of an honorable. The heaven-devouring demon monarch attempted to devour the God bless Empress. As for her life and death, he wasn't concerned, because he couldn't control this move himself. Without a sound, the God bless Empress disappeared into the black hole, and into the heaven-devouring demon monarch's stomach. God bless Empress, you shouldn't have challenged me. What a pity. The heaven-devouring demon monarch shook his head secretly. There weren't many among the younger generation of the demons who dared to challenge him, because they knew how terrifying his heaven-devouring earth was. Heaven-devouring demon monarch, aren't you celebrating too early? At this moment, the back of the heaven-devouring demon monarch exploded all of a sudden. Blood rained down while the God bless Empress dashed out. You actually broke through my heaven-devouring earth? The heaven-devouring demon monarch turned his head slowly with a look of disbelief. After defeating the heaven-devouring demon monarch, the God bless Empress' reputation among the demons grew. Some even secretly believed that the God bless Empress would become one of the strongest people in the history of the Dark Goddess bloodline. She would become the right-hand man of the great Demon King bloodline. Yi Chen, don't make me feel bored. On the God bless planet, the God bless Empress looked in the direction of the four major life star zones. Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, there were only 150 years left until the 500-year deadline. 5 elements sword art will decline after reaching its peak. Inside a barren life star, Yi Chen danced his sword art in a frenzy. As his sword art danced, the energy of the life star continued to collapse and weaken. With a boom, the huge life star exploded. Once the violent shock waves got close to Yi Chun, they would be weakened to 100th or 1,000th of their original strength. Chapter 1271. Not only did Zenith Decline contain a powerful defense, but it was also more than 10 times stronger than Zenith Decline in terms of weakening external attacks. However, there was always a loss. Apart from weakening external attacks, Zenith Decline could also strengthen the power of one's sword technique. Zenith Decline did not have this effect. It was extremely extreme. However, for Yi Chun, what he truly needed was Peak Decline. Peak Decline was a bit weak, but the weakening wasn't too severe. And the strengthening of his sword arts wasn't too powerful either. Average development meant mediocrity, so he might as well focus on one point. With Peak Decline, Yi Chun could be considered an ultimate sword artist among quasi-sovereigns. He could both attack and defend, and had no weaknesses. Combined with Heart Sword Realm, even a desolate life planet couldn't bear it. It should be known that the range of Peak Decline was not fixed, and completely depended on Yi Chun's will. When it was small, he only needed to protect himself. When it was large, it could cover a radius of 10 million li. Once one entered this range, it would already be good if the enemy could display even half of their strength. At the border of Black Tortoise Star Field and White Tiger Star Field, there was a huge floating meteorite. 2 figures were sitting on it, playing chess. True Marshal Supreme, I didn't expect you to dare come. Admirable. The person on the opposite side raised his head. It was the number 1 Supreme of the demons, Sky Demon Sovereign. At this moment, the two didn't emit any supreme aura, and looked like 2 ordinary kings. True Marshal Supreme placed a white chess piece and said indifferently, "Why not? Aren't you afraid that I'll set a trap to kill you?" The Sky Demon Sovereign had 2 divine artifacts. One was the Sky Demon Sacred Armor, and the other was the Bloodlust Spear. The divine artifacts were refined from the fusion of Paragon weapons with divine stones. They were many times more powerful than Paragon weapons, and the True Martial Sovereign only had the True Martial Divine Jian. Celestial Demon Sovereign was confident that he could kill Supreme True Martial in a protracted battle. Of course, it had to be a protracted battle, so if he wanted to kill Supreme True Martial, he had to set up a formation to trap him. Hee. True Martial Supreme smiled. You can try. With that, his right hand stretched forward, and the white chess piece fell. Sky Demon Sovereign sized up True Martial Supreme's wrist. His eyes suddenly squinted, and he laughed heartily. As expected of Supreme Martial Sage, he was able to find a sacred artifact in just a few hundred years. Impressive. Previously, Celestial Demon Sovereign didn't pay attention to it. But just now, when Supreme True Martial was playing chess, part of his wrist was exposed, revealing the golden scales. With Celestial Demon Sovereign's eyesight, he could tell at a glance that the scales contained the power of a saint artifact. The power of a saint artifact was very special, so it couldn't be forged. How could it be that easy to obtain a saint tool? This is just a defective one. Of course, I am still very confident in its might. How about we have a spar? Supreme True Martial's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Celestial Archdevil stared fixedly at Supreme True Martial. Initially, he wanted to probe Supreme True Martial, but now that Supreme True Martial said he wanted to spar, he hesitated. The demons had always been paranoid, even after becoming a Supreme. Celestial Archdevil waved his hand. This time, I'm not looking for you for anything else, it's about the Azura world. Azura world? Supreme True Martial's brows creased. The Azura world was not a world of life. According to the records, it was an arena created by the Azura god. In the Azura world, every time one won a battle, they would be rewarded with a drop of Azura spring water. The Azura spring water contained a mysterious substance that could help a quasi-venerable step into the 9th layer of life and death realm, which was also the supremacy realm. The more Azura spring water one had, the higher the success rate. You want to open Azura world? Supreme True Martial looked at Celestial Demon Sovereign. Right, it's about time. Give me an explanation. In truth, Supreme True Martial didn't want to open the Azura world. No one knew when it started, but the devil race and the human race each controlled a yin-yang Azura stone. Only when the yin-yang Azura stone was combined could the Azura world be opened. It had been 100,000 years since the last time the Azura world was opened, and the consequence was that more than half of the human race's geniuses died. Celestial Demon Sovereign smiled. Within 500 years, don't you think this explanation is enough? Supreme True Marshal said. You think I'll believe you? You have no choice but to believe me. Supreme Golden Buddha hasn't recovered yet, right? So what? It was just a small war. We the demons have been able to suppress you humans for so many years. We didn't rely on a few advantages. You should know this yourself. Seeing that Supreme True Marshal was silent, Celestial Demon Sovereign continued. Opening Azura world is beneficial to both of us. I'll give you some time to consider, but I hope it won't take too long. Celestial Demon Sovereign stood up, ready to leave. Supreme True Marshal didn't stand up to send him off. All of a sudden, a long spear appeared in Celestial Demon Sovereign's hand, and he thrust it at Supreme True Marshal. The spear was so fast that even time and space vanished in the face of this spear. Ding! Supreme True Marshal was sent flying backward. Celestial Demon Sovereign, what are you trying to do? Supreme True Marshal bellowed. Just kidding. Celestial Demon Sovereign smirked. But in his heart he thought, it really is a sage-level inner armor. The power of the bloodlust spear can't penetrate it. Forget it, now is not the time to fight. Let's open Azura world first. As he spoke, Celestial Demon Sovereign's body flickered and disappeared without a trace. Supreme True Marshal's face darkened as he touched the place where he was hit. He stood in the starry sky and pondered for a long time. After an unknown period of time, Supreme True Marshal turned around and disappeared. He's not injured. Looks like it's a sage-level inner armor. In the starry sky, a faintly discernible voice came from a black chess piece floating in the sky. Then the black chess piece exploded and turned into nothingness. True Marshal Star, True Marshal Grand Hall. Pfft. Supreme True Marshal's figure appeared in the inner chamber of the True Marshal Grand Hall. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Supreme True Marshal's face was pale. Such a domineering bloodlust spear. The Royal Carp inner armor can only block 90% of its power. In fact, Supreme True Marshal did not lie to Celestial Demon Sovereign. The sage-level inner armor he wore was indeed a defective one. The reason why he suggested a spar was because he wanted to make use of Celestial Demon Sovereign's suspicious nature to deter him from acting rashly. As for the last spear attack, Supreme True Marshal had already anticipated it. Celestial Demon Sovereign was a suspicious person and would definitely probe the opponent. However, Supreme True Marshal did not expect the spear to be so fast. It seemed like Celestial Demon Sovereign had unearthed more of the bloodlust spear's potential. The demons are ambitious. It's not a good time to fight in the near future. I can only open Azura world. Supreme Jinwu sighed. It was said that the human race had amazing geniuses. But who knew that the human race had always been walking on a tightrope? Once there was a shortage of talents, the human race would be completely suppressed by the demon race. Since ancient times, the human race might have had the upper hand, but they had never had the absolute upper hand. Azura world might be an opportunity. I hope I'm not digging my own grave. Chapter 1272. Yichen didn't manage to enter seclusion for 500 years. On the 360th year, Azura world opened. Let's experience the legendary Azura world. On this day, Yichen brought Murong Qingqing to Spirit Realm. Spirit Realm was the life starfield where old ancestor Wuling resided. It was only 1/20th the size of White Tiger Starfield. Unfortunately, Azura world was right next to Spirit Realm. As far as the eye could see, a bronze gate over 100 billion li tall towered in the starry sky. Compared to it, life planets were minuscule, and ordinary planets were like specks of dust. The bronze gate was covered in rust. The gate had already opened, revealing a crimson whirlpool. So this is Azura Gate. So huge. I didn't expect to see Azura Gate enter Azura world. This life has not been in vain. It's said that one can obtain a drop of Azura Spring for every win in Azura world. I'm not here to look. With the Azura Spring, I'll have a chance to become a sovereign in the future. As soon as Azura world opened, An endless stream of eighth-layer life and death heavenly kings rushed over. Demon race, human race, evil spirit race, Wuxia race, giant race, barbarian race, spirit race. The eighth-layer life and death heavenly kings of every major race in the universe rushed over. Among them were newbies who had just entered the eighth layer, as well as quasi-sovereigns who had lingered at the peak for tens of thousands of years. The former came to broaden their horizons, but there was no lack of ambitious people who wanted to win a few battles and obtain a few drops of Azura Spring to build a foundation for the future. The latter, on the other hand, wanted to break through the limit of one's lifespan and become a sovereign. There were simply too many old monsters who had stopped at the peak of quasi-sovereign realm. Nobody wanted to die, and there were only two ways to stay alive. One was to obtain a treasure that could increase one's lifespan, and the other was to break through to the ninth layer and become a sovereign. Compared to the former, the latter was undoubtedly more attractive. After all, treasures that could increase one's lifespan were too hard to find. It could be said that all the old monsters couldn't help but rush over. Whether the youngsters on the quasi-sovereign list could withstand the impact of the old monsters was still unknown. Swish, swish, swish. One figure after another entered the bronze gate, like moths flying into a flame. There are so many people. Looking at the sea of people outside the bronze gate, Morong Qingqing frowned. The Azura Spring water is something that can only be found by luck. No one will give it up. As for the Azura Spring water, Yi Chen was also determined to obtain it. After 360 years of cultivation, his cultivation base had long reached the peak of life and death realm, and his foundation was extremely solid. Without any external help, he was confident that he could become a supreme expert within 1,000 years. If he could obtain enough Azura Spring water, the time would be greatly reduced. It should be known that the greatest use of Azura Spring water was to improve one's foundation. The Jade Spirit Emperor is here. What a powerful aura! A voice suddenly came from the crowd. Yi Chen looked over. Unbeknownst to him, a few young men had appeared hundreds of thousands of miles away. The young man in the lead had a tall and straight posture. The corners of his body were very hard, as if they had been carved by knives and axes. Jade Spirit Emperor, ranked 9th on the quasi-venerable list, a super genius of the spirit race. Let's go in first, Yi Chen said to Morong Qingqing. Yes. Morong Qingqing nodded. Shua. The two shot toward the crimson whirlpool in the bronze gate. Interesting. Sizing up Yi Chen's back, the corner of Jade Spirit Emperor's mouth curved into a smile. Jade Spirit Emperor, this time, it's time for you to prove yourself. The young man beside Jade Spirit Emperor said respectfully, don't look down on others. The world is so big, and no one can guarantee that they will always be number one. Jade Spirit Emperor stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and said indifferently. Another young man said, your Jade Soul True Body has already reached the 7th layer. Apart from a few people, I'm afraid the others won't even be able to harm a hair of yours. Jade Soul True Body was one of the 3 great body, refining martial skills of the spirit race. It was a lot weaker than the 9th golden body, but it still couldn't be underestimated. When cultivated to the extreme, even a black hole would find it hard to destroy it. You'll know when the time comes. Jade Spirit Emperor didn't put the young man's words in his heart. How could a frog at the bottom of a well see the brilliance of the outside world? As time passed, more and more 8th layer life and death heavenly kings arrived. 3 groups of demons arrived. The first group was led by a young man with a wolf's head and a human's body. The second group was led by God-blessed Queen. And the third group was led by a black-haired young man with a frightening aura. The young man from the evil spirit race with the huge cross-shaped sword on his back left a very deep impression. His gaze swept across the crowd, and no one dared to meet his eyes. It was as if his gaze could not only see through everyone's secrets, but even their fates. A black-cloaked young sword emperor appeared from the Wuxia race. He was a young golden giant of the giant race, a 2-headed four-armed giant. Apart from the frightening young quasi-sovereigns, some old monsters were even more astonishing. Nobody knew how so many old monsters existed. Some of them were even rumored to be dead. For example, the sobbing blood old man of the evil spirit race was said to have lived for a whole 120,000 years. The old guys are coming out one after another. That's good too. My sword burial art just happens to be lacking a sacrificial offering. The white bone sword emperor looked at an old guy who had become famous before him and sneered. In the past 360 years, he had cultivated the sword burial art to a higher level. He could already create the scene of falling flower petals. Apart from this, his white bone light slash and white bone time sword arts had also reached a new level. He was confident that he could defeat Yi Chun with one sword strike. Passing through the crimson whirlpool, Yi Chun and Morong Qingqing arrived at an incomparably vast arena. The boundaries of this arena couldn't be seen, and its boundless aura was enough to make any arrogant person calm down. Before the power of gods, mortals could only lower their heads. This was not shameful. The arena was like an enlarged version of the Roman Colosseum. The spectator stands were densely packed, and without exception, they were all at the 8th layer of life and death realm. Yi Chun. Su Jing's voice came. Let's go. Yi Chun saw Su Jing. Beside Su Jing sat the great elder Celestial Crystal Dragon Emperor, Golden River Dragon Emperor, and the others. Seeing Yi Chun, Celestial Crystal Dragon Emperor, and the others were deeply moved. The seemingly weak youngster in front of them had now become an existence they could only look up to. It had to be said that time could change everything. A huge hourglass hung above the arena. The sand continuously flowed down, and when the sand flowed out, the arena would begin. A smile appeared on Yi Chun's face. He saw Dugaju and the others. He wondered how much they had improved in the past few hundred years. At their level, the seemingly huge gap was actually not that big. Everything depended on one's potential. Chapter 1273. Yi Chun wasn't sure how many martial emperors there were from the various races, but he could guess it just by looking at the sea of people in the arena. The funnel-shaped arena was clearly divided into several factions. There were the demons, the evil spirit race, the Yiksha race, the green men race, and the other races from the Demons Alliance. There were also the human race, the giant race, the barbarian race, and the other races from the Human Races Alliance. Other than them, there were some neutral races that hadn't expressed their stance yet, such as the spirit race, the tail race, and the specter race. Yi Chun, you're already here. Suddenly, the golden-robed emperor's voice came from not far away. The current golden-robed emperor's aura was stronger than before, and his eyes were filled with confidence. It was obvious that he had improved a lot in the past 360 years. I've just arrived. There were many seats beside Yi Chun, and he extended a hand to invite the golden-robed emperor over. Sitting beside Yi Chun, the golden-robed emperor smiled. I originally planned to gather 500 years later, but I didn't expect it to be brought forward by 140 years. How lively! Almost all the martial emperors and quasi-martial sovereigns from the various races are here. It is indeed lively. Yi Chun nodded. More and more people gathered in the spectator stands, and judging from the speed at which the hourglass was flowing, it would probably take 3 days for the sand to flow out. The next day, Yin Qingxian arrived. The third day, Ajio and Lung Fifan arrived. Soon it was the morning of the 4th day. In the sky above the arena, the last trace of sand had flowed out of the hourglass. As the sand flowed out, a spring appeared out of nowhere. The spring water was pink and translucent, as if it was carved from a pink diamond. Seeing this pink spring water, everyone's eyes turned red. Just like the records, the Azura spring water was pink. A single drop of Azura spring water could save them 100 years of hard work. So how many drops of spring water was there? Other than the Azura spring water, a stone tablet appeared in the sky, and the rules were written on it. You can forfeit 3 times. Forfeit 3 times? Interesting. Yi Chun fell into deep thought. The golden-robed emperor smiled. Looks like we'll have to stay in this arena for a year and a half. Dong. The war drums that had not sounded for countless years rang out, and the atmosphere in the wrestling arena instantly changed. The fiery atmosphere was filled with hot-bloodedness and bloodlust. At this moment, the majority of people only had victory in their eyes. It's about to start. Morong Qingqing was also affected by the atmosphere. Her palms were sweaty, and a faint fragrance wafted from her sweat. Swish, 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 swish. A total of 18 red pillars of light shot towards the spectator stands. The Emperor, who was enveloped by the red pillars of light, appeared in the arena at almost the same time. At this moment, the arena had been divided into 9 sections, and 9 battles could be held. Kill. The 9 matches began simultaneously. After half a cup of tea's time, out of the 18 people, only 6 were still alive. The other 12 had either been killed, or had taken each other down with them. The bitter battle situation woke many people from their stupor. The Azura spring water was good, but one had to be alive to enjoy it. The sound of the war drums was too strange. It could actually affect their minds. I forfeit. The second round of battles began, and 2 people forfeited. Sensing their voices, the red pillar of light teleported them back to the spectator stands. As for their opponents who won without a fight, they could directly obtain a drop of Azura spring water. In the 5th round, Yi Chen's heart tightened. This time, there was Morong Qingcheng. Fortunately, her opponent was not too powerful, only at mid-8th layer life and death realm. Without any surprise or danger, Morong Qingcheng obtained victory. As for her opponent being a human, she also managed to preserve her life. Of course, one could forfeit 3 times, but as long as one didn't forfeit, the loser would be directly expelled from the Azura world. Is this the Azura spring water? Sizing up that pink diamond-like drop of Azura spring water in Morong Qingcheng's palm, Yi Chen released his soul power, wanting to analyze it. However, no matter how profound his soul power was, he couldn't analyze the mysteries of the Azura spring water, because all of its essence had been sealed. Moreover, the Azura spring water had been contaminated with Morong Qingcheng's life aura, making it impossible to transfer. Only Morong Qingcheng could use it. Let's take it first, Yi Chen said. All right. With a wave of her hand, Morong Qingcheng melted the Azura spring water and entered her body. A red light flickered, and without any reason, Morong Qingcheng's aura rose by a notch. Her foundation became more stable, and some useless demonic power impurities were directly evaporated. The impurities in her soul were also erased, indeed worthy of being called Azura spring water. Seeing Morong Qingcheng's transformation, Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Although 1 drop of Azura spring water did not seem to have a heaven-defying effect, it still saved 100 years of bitter cultivation. Of course, this was the case for ordinary people. For Morong Qingcheng, with Rose Supreme's inheritance, 20 to 30 years of cultivation could have such an effect. For Yi Chen, it might only take 10 years. Unknowingly, 3 months passed. The spectator stands had become much sparser. Some were directly killed, some were half dead, and some were expelled from the Azura world. Some of the better ones had forfeited 3 times. In these 3 months, the number of people in the spectator stands had decreased to only 1% of the original number. Of course, the number was still not small. During this period, Yi Chen participated in 10 matches and won 10 of them, obtaining 10 drops of Azura spring water in total. 10 drops of Azura spring water had strengthened Yi Chen's foundation to an unimaginable level. His cultivation base had reached the peak of peak 8th layer life and death realm, and he could become a sovereign at any time. Of course, becoming a sovereign not only required a solid foundation, but also a kind of heavenly Tao comprehension. Otherwise, even if he could break through to the sovereign realm, he would be struck to death by the universe's heavenly tribulation. Wanting to become a sovereign was not that easy. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many old fogies stuck at this threshold. Morong Qingcheng's improvement was even greater than Yi Chen's. She had obtained a total of 12 drops of Azura spring water, and her foundation had undergone an earth-shaking transformation. She no longer had any hidden dangers, and her current cultivation base had also reached late 8th layer life and death realm, only a step away from the peak. As long as her luck was not bad, reaching peak 8th layer life and death realm was just a matter of time. Buzz! A beam of red light shrouded Yi Chen, and in the next moment, Yi Chen appeared at the center of the arena. His opponent was a blood-haired old man, a quasi-sovereign of the Yiksha race. Junior, you're dead for sure now that you've fallen into this old man's hands. Seeing that Yi Chen did not give up, a sinister expression flickered on the blood-haired old man's face. He knew of Yi Chen's identity, and he was very happy to kill such a genius. Perhaps, the higher-ups of the Yiksha race would even reward him with some life-extending treasures. This Yi Chen is out of luck. Bloodbone is not an ordinary quasi-sovereign. Bloodbone Old Man had been famous for a long time, and he was almost 90,000 years old this year. Ordinary quasi-sovereigns were not his opponent at all. If not for the fact that he had been in seclusion for the past few years, he would definitely have a place on the quasi-sovereign list. Of course, the other king-level experts still did not know that Yi Chen had the title of Sword Emperor. Otherwise, they would not have said such words. Die Bloodbone Divine Palm. Bloodbone Old Man's palm struck at Yi Chen, layer upon layer of palm prints resembling a sea of blood. You're the one who's going to die. Yi Chen pulled out his sword and slightly shook it. Immediately, the space-time in front of him was sliced into millions of pieces, and Bloodbone Old Man's body seemed to have fallen apart, turning into countless blood-colored cubes. Chapter 1274. After 360 years of cultivation, Yi Chen had found more than 9,000 loopholes in the death cut. After erasing them, the death cut was the true death cut, which was billions of times more precise than the most precise scalpel. In Yi Chen's eyes, Old Man Bloodbone was merely a corpse waiting to be dissected. With a suction force, Old Man Bloodbone's storage ring fell into Yi Chen's hand. In the arena, the loser's wealth might not be any less than the Azura spring water. This is ridiculous. I remember this kid is not even 600 years old. Humph. Let him be arrogant for a while longer. When he meets a powerful opponent, he will still die. That's right. Our Demon Sky Demon Emperor, for Winged Dragon Emperor, God Bless Queen, and Wolf Emperor can kill him easily. Apart from that, some of our seniors are also very unfathomable. A mere Yi Chen is not worth mentioning. Yi Chen's talent and comprehension were well known among all the races. Shaman Demon Emperor had even predicted his future. Unfortunately, several assassination plans had failed. This time, the Demon Supremes were also planning to deal with Yi Chen in the arena. Of course, opening the Shura world was not entirely to deal with Yi Chen. Yi Chen was only a small factor, which was not enough to affect everyone's hearts. With Old Man Bloodbone as an example, many demi-sovereigns chose to directly give up when facing Yi Chen. Not to mention the emperors, Yi Chen could kill them with a single breath. Yi Chen was not the only one who was dazzling. Some powerful demi-sovereigns began to stand out. There were young demi-sovereigns and old demi-sovereigns. The later it was, the more powerful the ones who remained were. There are a lot less people. Golden-robed Emperor scanned the crowd and found that there were less than 1,000 demi-sovereigns left in the audience. Yi Chen said, "The real battle has just begun." In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed since they arrived in the Hell Azura world. Every day, the sea of people in the spectator stands would decrease in number. Most of the participants had forfeited 3 times and were expelled from the Hell Azura world. There were also quite a number of people who had died. If it was any other time, the various races would definitely be heartbroken. But now, everyone was calm. After all, death had occurred so frequently that they had long become numb to it. As the number of people dropped below 1,000, the duels in the arena became more intense. Very few people would give up unless the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Be careful. If you can't handle it, just give up. Yi Chen reminded Morong Qingqing and Su Jing. Morong Qingqing's foundation was becoming more and more stable, but in terms of talent, she was still a little lacking. It would be very dangerous for her to encounter those at the top of the quasi-venerables list, or those old monsters who had been famous for a long time. As for Su Jing's progress, Yi Chen wasn't too sure, but he couldn't help but worry. Once a fight started in the arena, there would basically be deaths. It was extremely cruel. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Su Jing nodded. The arena was no longer divided. It became a one-on-one battle. This time, the White Bone Sword Emperor and a powerful quasi-venerables from the Yiksha race appeared in the arena. Have a taste of my sword burial art. The opponent was very strong. They fought for dozens of rounds, but there was no clear winner. The White Bone Sword Emperor had no choice but to use his trump card, the sword burial art. Several petals fell from the void, and the opponent couldn't move at all. He was killed with one sword strike. The White Bone Sword Emperor has improved a lot. This sword burial art is 100 times stronger than before. The golden-clad emperor clicked his tongue in admiration. He didn't know if he could be immune to the sword burial art, but he was sure that it wouldn't be easy to defeat the White Bone Sword Emperor. Soon, it was the golden-clad emperor's turn. The golden-clad emperor's golden staff art was extremely domineering. He was like a golden god of war, and he smashed his opponent into meat paste with a few strikes. Next, Yi Chen also saw the strength of Du Guju, Dantai Mingyue, and Chu Zhongtian. What astonished Yi Chen was Ajiao. Ajiao's top 10 martial Dao required 10 supreme martial arts to be unleashed to the extreme. However, if there really were 10 supreme martial arts, even Yi Chen wouldn't dare to say that he could easily win. Currently, Ajiao had grasped 4 supreme martial arts. When the 4 martial Dao phantoms appeared, a quasi-sovereign ranked 39th on the quasi-sovereign list exploded. Yi Chen, your girlfriend is in danger this time. Don't you want her to forfeit? The golden-clad emperor said to Yi Chen. Yi Chen frowned slightly, but he didn't say anything. Su Jing's opponent was the Green Man race's Berserk Emperor, who was ranked 26th on the quasi-sovereign list. In the entire universe, the quasi-sovereign list was very realistic. Other than some old monsters who hadn't appeared for a long time and newcomers in recent years, all the peak quasi-sovereigns were listed. Being ranked 26th proved that the Green Man race's Berserk Emperor's reputation wasn't undeserved. After all, the golden-clad emperor was only ranked 24th. However, Yi Chen knew that sometimes he couldn't make decisions for Su Jing. She still had to rely on herself. The golden dragon of the dragon race must taste delicious. The Berserk Emperor was extremely tall. Standing there, he resembled a Hulk. His muscles gave off an indestructible feeling, and his eyes were filled with savagery and savagery. Compared to the Berserk Emperor, Su Jing's figure was extremely petite, forming a stark contrast. The Berserk Emperor has eaten the meat of the Silver Dragon and Bronze Dragon. He can't be thinking of eating his opponent raw in the arena, right? That might not be the case. He's a lunatic. In the Green Man race's camp, a few quasi-sovereigns discussed maliciously. Hearing the other party's words, Su Jing didn't get angry. However, her eyes gradually turned bright gold. Whoosh! With a flash, Su Jing pounced at the Berserk Emperor. Powerful earth energy extended far behind her, eventually turning into a draconic earth energy. A dragon roamed Taishu, and its head was nowhere to be seen. In the blink of an eye, the Berserk Emperor's surroundings were filled with divine dragons. Time and space seemed to have turned into water. Supreme ultimate skill of the Flying Dragon race, Flying Dragon Taishu. Child's play. Watch my 10 directions cloud movement. The Mad Emperor roared, and the surrounding space started to warp and collapse. It was to the point that the area where Su Jing could move became smaller and smaller, and she felt like her hands and feet were tied up. Heaven-warring godly fist loose. The Berserk Emperor couldn't do anything when the dragon was in the sea. However, if the dragon was trapped in the swamp, the Berserk Emperor would have a way to deal with it. He locked onto Su Jing's figure and punched out with a red fist. Boom! At the critical moment, Su Jing blocked the red fist with her dragon Prajna palm. However, she was also knocked out of the space-time continuum. Striding forward, the Berserk Emperor arrived in front of Su Jing in 3 steps. Raising his green palm, it became bigger than a mountain, wanting to imprison Su Jing. This was another ultimate skill of the Berserk Emperor, Heaven Binding Hand. The Heaven Binding Hand's space-time transformation was no weaker than the 10 directions cloud movement. As long as one was trapped by it, they would be like a bird in a cage, or a beast in a zoo. No one could escape. Su Jing's current situation was no better than a bird in a cage. She was having difficulty breathing. Seeing this, Yi Chen gripped the armrest tightly and leaned forward slightly. A terrifying aura was suppressed in his body, like a volcano that was about to erupt. The Gold Robe Emperor, who was at the side, was worried about Su Jing. But when he felt Yi Chen's aura, he couldn't help but shiver. It was too terrifying. He even suspected that there was a primordial ferocious beast hiding inside Yi Chen's body. Chapter 1275. Naturally, the Mad King could not sense Yi Chen's terrifying aura. With the protection of the Shiraba's rules, he was not worried that anyone would barge in. At that moment, all he could see was Su Jing, who was struggling like a cornered beast. The heaven-binding hand tightened, and the Mad King could almost see Su Jing being crushed. Roar! All of a sudden, a resounding dragon's roar erupted. The dazzling golden light seemed as though it was about to tear apart the heavens and earth. In the next instant, a slender and delicate fist that was filled with a domineering aura blasted out. As the golden fist pushed forward, space-time distorted. The space-time force field created by the heaven-binding hand crumbled. It was as though this golden fist had the power to pierce through everything. Sacred Dragon Fist. Furthermore, it was not the rank 8 Sacred Dragon Fist. It was also not an ordinary rank 9 Sacred Dragon Fist. It was the mid-rank 9 Sacred Dragon Fist. The peak of the Sacred Dragon Fist was only slightly weaker than a true consummate supreme martial art. The Sacred Dragon Fist was still very far from the peak of the 9th step, but below the supreme being level, who could cultivate a supreme martial art to perfection. Even Yi Chen was far from being able to do it. He could only gradually approach it. Therefore, the might of the Sacred Dragon Fist was evident. After punching through the Berserk Emperor's heaven-binding hand, Su Jing's hair turned golden. She took a step forward, and a formless power congealed beneath her feet to form a golden cloud that carried her forward. Boom! A second mid-level level 9 Saint Dragon Fist was unleashed, and space-time itself was dyed golden. Heaven-battling Divine Fist. The Berserk Emperor roared as he punched out with his red fist. Boom! The terrifying explosion distorted space-time, and some space-time laws shattered. Ordinary quasi-sovereigns would be torn apart by the space-time storm if they got close to the explosion. This was a battle between peak quasi-sovereigns. Ta-ta-ta! The Mad Emperor retreated 3 steps, as if he was no match for Su Jing's Sacred Dragon Fist. Impossible, heaven-battling Godly Fist. The Berserk Emperor refused to give up, and without hesitation, he attacked once more. This time, the Mad King retreated a total of 7 steps. The third time, 100 steps. For the 4th time, he was sent flying, blood spurting from his mouth. What a reversal! The crazy Emperor is actually no match for this woman. That should be a mid-tier rank 9 Saint Dragon Fist. It is normal for the Mad Emperor to lose. I wonder how the Mad King is going to deal with this. If that's all he's got, he'll definitely be beaten to death. There was a lot of discussion among the audience. Bastard! Don't underestimate me. The Berserk Emperor was thoroughly enraged. Su Jing's comeback had been completely unexpected, but he would not allow himself to be defeated just like that. You no longer have a chance. Strands of golden aura emanated from Su Jing's body. Under the pressure of the Berserk Emperor, she had broken through her limits. The Sacred Dragon Fist was different from a supreme martial art. With every increase in level, one would have a new understanding of the use of power. At this moment, even if Su Jing did not use the Sacred Dragon Fist, she would still be many times stronger than before. This was because she could use the limited power to unleash even more power. Cloud movement of all directions. The crazed Emperor's hand slammed out towards Su Jing, causing space-time to distort and collapse. Swish, 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 swish. Once again, Su Jing used her Taishu movement skill. Now that the Soaring Dragon Taishu movement skill was so powerful that the Crazy King's 10 Directions Cloud movement skill could no longer lock onto Su Jing. Bang! With a twist of her body, Su Jing appeared behind the Crazy King and punched him in the back. But that was not all. Dozens of Su Jings appeared from all directions, and dozens of golden fists landed on the Crazy King. The Crazy King was like a hornet's nest. Intense golden light shot out from his body, and when the light reached its limit, the Crazy King's entire body exploded and turned into dust. The Crazy King, ranked 26th in the quasi-venerable ranking, was dead. Congratulations! Yi Chen from the Goldie dynasty laughed, his heart filled with envy. At their cultivation level, other than becoming stronger, they also wanted to find a powerful partner. It was only when Su Jing won that Yi Chen heaved a sigh of relief. Who is that woman? She's so strong. If Su Jing's appearance was already enough to make people's eyes light up, then Yan Qingxuan's appearance was even more shocking. Her opponent was not weak. On the contrary, he was very strong. He was an old monster from the demons, but he could not even take 3 moves from Yan Qingxian. Gradually, the number of people in the audience dropped to around 500. Morong Qingqing had already forfeited once. In the wrestling ring, Yi Chen was facing off against a swordsman. This person was Sevenju Swordsman, ranked 27th on the quasi-venerable list. Like Yi Chen, he was from the human race. Maybe I'm not your opponent, but I will not forfeit. As a human, Sevenju Swordsman naturally knew that Yi Chen had obtained the title of Sword Emperor, and that he was not his opponent. Yi Chen said, "Then let's spar." "Be careful." Sevenju Swordsman did not dare to be careless. He immediately released his sword realm, Sevenju Sword Realm. He then waved his sword, and 7 beams of sword light flew towards Yi Chen. Yi Chen knew that this sword was not that simple. Sure enough, the 7 sword lights transformed in the air, turning from 7 to 49, then to 343. When they approached Yi Chen, the sword lights blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Each of them contained an extraordinary might, containing the mysteries of yin and yang extreme transformation. If an ordinary peak quasi-zun was not careful, they might be turned into a bloody pulp by the myriad of sword lights. In terms of changes, Yi Chen was more than 100 times stronger than Sevenju Swordsman. Therefore, it was too easy for him to break this move. With a flick of his wrist, sword shadows filled the air, and all the sword lights were instantly cancelled out. Take my 7 hearts 7 despair myriad flower sword. The yin-yang profound sword art transformed into the space-time sword art. Sevenju Swordsman suddenly disappeared, and sword lights rained down from all directions. Under the distortion of space-time, more sword lights were formed. Eventually, the billions of sword lights formed a barrier that enveloped Yi Chen. What a powerful sword art! Unfortunately, he encountered Yi Chen. The golden-clad emperor sighed inwardly. Sevenju Swordsman was very strong. Although he was very confident in winning, it would not be too easy. There was a certain chance of a comeback. What is Sevenju myriad flower sword? Surprisingly, Yi Chen did not counterattack. Instead, he used the 5 elements sword art to defend. This was because he wanted to absorb the essence of the Sevenju myriad flower sword. He could not use it now, but it did not mean that he would not use it in the future. No matter how strange the Sevenju myriad flower sword was, it could not break Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art. If Sevenju Swordsman knew that Yi Chen had only used 1% of the 5 elements sword art's power, who knew what he would think? Finally, the Sevenju myriad flower sword's momentum was exhausted. Sevenju Swordsman sighed and put away his sword. As expected of the Sword Emperor, I did not lose unjustly. Let's spar again in the future. Yi Chen was looking forward to the Sevenju Swordsman. He could feel that the Sevenju myriad flower sword was just a superficial skill. He hoped that the Sevenju myriad flower sword would be 100 times stronger next time. Definitely. Sevenju Swordsman was a little surprised by Yi Chen's enthusiasm. Of course he was happy. Being valued by the Sword Emperor meant that his sword art was worth watching. Yi Chen did not know that his words were very important to the human swordsman. Although Sevenju Swordsman's achievements in the future could not be considered great, because of Yi Chen's words, he successfully stepped into the sovereign realm. Chapter 1276. After a month, the number of spectators had dropped to 100. Dugaju, Chu Zhongtian, Dantai Mingyue, and Morong Qingqing were eliminated one by one. After all, they were still too young, unable to contend against these peak geniuses who had cultivated for thousands of years, or ancient freaks who had cultivated for nearly 100,000 years. It was not easy for them to reach this stage. Dugaju originally had a chance to go one step further, but unfortunately, he encountered the 13th ranked quasi-sovereign, Yi Jianhuang of Yiksha race. Therefore Dugaju, who had never feared death, chose to forfeit. After all, once the difference in strength was too great, there was no point in making a breakthrough. He wasn't afraid of death, But he wouldn't throw his life away either. The former lifeless blade artist and current lifeless blade emperor, Lung Fifan, was also eliminated. His luck was even worse than Duguju's, as he was matched against the 5th-ranked quasi-sovereign, Four-Winged Dragon Emperor of Demons. Four-Winged Dragon Emperor's true form was a demonic dragon. Not only did he possess the powerful constitution of the dragon race, but he also possessed a comprehensive ability that was not inferior to anyone. Even some old freaks chose to forfeit, not to mention Lung Fifan. Including this time, Lung Fifan had forfeited 3 times. Previously, he was matched against Child Emperor of Evil Spirit Race and Wolf Emperor of Demons. When the number of people remaining reached 100, the Azura spring boiled, and each person obtained 10 drops of Azura spring water. It was not hard to imagine that after the battles, everyone's cultivation base would reach the limit of 8th layer life and death realm. In the near future, there would be a large number of Supremes. Of course, the premise was that they couldn't die before the battles were over. It's getting more and more difficult. These old fellows have truly hidden themselves deeply. Golden-robed Emperor's expression was not as relaxed as before. None of the remaining 100 people were easy to provoke. They were either famous quasi-sovereigns or old freaks who had hidden themselves deeply. Some old freaks were the easiest to be vigilant against. After all, before knowing the opponent's strength, one would always want to give it a try. They would not easily forfeit. Among the old fellows, we have to pay attention to those 6. Yin Qingxian suddenly pointed at the 6 old fellows of each faction. The golden-robed emperor looked at Yin Qingxian in surprise, not knowing where her confidence came from. Yi Chen said, "It's not wrong to believe in her. Her mysterious path involves fate, so it shouldn't be difficult for her to see through a person's strength. Since that's the case, I'll trust you this once. I wonder, how many of those 6 old fellows do you think I will not be able to defeat?" the golden-clothed emperor asked. Yin Qingxian said, "The black-white old man and the yellow-robed old man are not your match. If you meet them, just forfeit immediately. As for the other 4, 3 of them are extremely dangerous. If you meet them, you will have to give it your all, and even make some breakthroughs to defeat them. The last one is roughly on par with you. Of course, this is just a rough estimate." The golden-clothed emperor was about to say something, but his gaze was attracted by the situation in the arena. It turned out that a new round of fights had begun. On one side was the human purple-robed emperor, and on the other side was the unknown yellow-robed old man from the demons. Due to the rules of the Sharaba field, the audience couldn't hear what they were saying. The purple-robed emperor didn't know that the yellow-robed old man was extremely dangerous, so he didn't choose to forfeit. Yin Qingxian frowned. The yellow-robed old man was scarier than she had imagined. He seemed to have sensed that Yin Qingxian was talking about him, so he turned his head and looked at Yin Qingxian, revealing an unfathomable smile. Not good. The golden-clothed emperor wanted to warn the purple-robed emperor, but it was too late. He could only hope that Yin Qingxian was wrong. However, he trusted Yi Chen a lot. If Yi Chen said that Yin Qingxuan's mysterious path was very powerful, then it must be true. "Young man, this old man doesn't want to kill people. Unfortunately, if I don't kill you today, who knows how many of my people you will kill in the future?" the yellow-robed old man said to the purple-robed emperor. The purple-robed emperor frowned. He had a bad feeling in his heart. This yellow-robed old man didn't seem simple, but he had never seen or heard of him before. "Who are you?" the purple-robed emperor asked. "I'm just a fisherman by the river of fate." The yellow-robed old man shook his head, not wanting to say more. "You're just trying to be mysterious. Take this," the purple-robed emperor shouted. He waved the purple fan in his hand, causing time and space to distort, turning into a sky-covering fan shadow that swept towards the yellow-robed old man. Buzz! The time and space rippled like water. The yellow-robed old man's body was like a reflection in the water, shaking along with the ripples, becoming blurry. However, when the fan shadow disappeared, the purple-robed emperor's pupils shrank. His opponent didn't even try to dodge, and actually dodged his ultimate move. What kind of movement skill was that? The purple-robed emperor is in danger. Yi Chen sucked in a deep breath. Ever since he started cultivating, This was the first time he had seen someone with such a deep comprehension of time profound. At least 50%. No, it might have reached 60%. Time and space revolution. The purple-robed emperor was the purple-robed emperor after all. Since he had decided to fight, he wouldn't back down. Pushing his Zhen Yuan to the limit, the purple-robed emperor instantly turned into 4 human figures. The 4 figures waved their purple fans, and instantly, a purple whirlwind wrapped around the yellow-robed old man. The powerful spinning power combined with the yin and yang profound was enough to reverse time and space. The yellow-robed old man still didn't try to dodge. His lips moved slightly as he started chanting. Hearing the yellow-robed old man's chanting, the entire crowd went silent. Everyone seemed to see their own reflections in the river of fate. Chanting of fate, it's the demon's Lich Emperor. An uproar broke out on the human side. Lich was a terrifying bloodline. The curse of being unable to become a supremacy for the rest of their lives allowed them to obtain heaven-defying strength. However, the Lich bloodline rarely left the demon realm and rarely appeared in front of people. According to records, a peak Lich Emperor was invincible below the supremacy level. Only the legendary Great Demon King bloodline could suppress one. So this old guy is a Lich Emperor. No wonder. In the evil spirit and Wuxia camps, some people curled their lips, looking fearful. Anyone who heard the name Lich Emperor would be extremely careful. Even the evil Sword Emperor, who was ranked 4th on the quasi-venerable list, opened his eyes and glanced at the yellow-robed old man. As the chanting sounded, the purple whirlwind froze. The yellow-robed old man gently pushed the purple whirlwind aside and walked toward the purple-robed emperor step by step. The purple-robed emperor wanted to move, but in front of the chanting of fate, he couldn't even move a finger. In the end, the yellow-robed old man pointed at the purple-robed emperor's forehead. The vitality in his eyes dissipated, and the purple-robed emperor's aura disappeared. The Lich Emperor is still so abnormal. The 4-winged dragon emperor sighed. The Lich bloodline was very mysterious even among the demons. The more abnormal one's family is, the better. The Sky Demon Emperor, who was ranked 2nd on the quasi-venerable list, grinned. The purple-robed emperor is dead. The golden-robed emperor, who was beside Yi Chun, muttered. Yi Chun comforted the golden-robed emperor. He knew that the purple-robed emperor had a good relationship with the purple-robed emperor. The purple-robed emperor's death was a big blow to him. Yi Chun turned his head and glanced at the yellow-robed old man, who had returned to the spectator stands. He shook his head. Once a fisherman by the river of fate entered the river, he would no longer be able to see fate clearly. The muddy river would drown and devour him. Chapter 1277. The White Bone Sword Emperor was very powerful. To be exact, his sword burial art was too powerful. Other than the black-white old man and the yellow-robed old man, the White Bone Sword Emperor was at the same level as the other 4 old men. However, because he was a human emperor, Yan Qingxian did not count him as one of them. After all, human emperors would not kill each other under normal circumstances. It's my turn. The red light beam shot towards the golden-robed emperor. In the next second, he appeared in the arena. His opponent was a short, monkey-like middle-aged devil race man. The golden-robed emperor was shocked, and his face looked extremely serious. This demon was the Shining Demon Emperor, ranked 20th in the quasi-venerable ranking. He came from the demon race, and his original form was an iron demon monkey. He was extremely fast, and his attacks were crazy and strange. That was why he was called the Shining Demon Emperor. Junior, it is your misfortune to have met me, the Shining Demon Emperor. The Shining Demon Emperor licked his lips as a cruel light flashed in his eyes. Cut the crap. Take this. Without wasting any time, the golden-robed emperor attacked with his rod. Shoo! The Shining Demon Emperor's body flashed, and he disappeared without a trace. The golden-robed emperor hurriedly stopped, and his soul power turned into a huge net, searching everywhere. Here, feeling a slight vibration in the space-time, the golden-robed emperor held his rod with both hands and swung out a powerful golden rod art. Many golden rod shadows pierced deep into the space-time. Ding 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 ding. Deep in the space-time, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Seeing this, the golden-robed emperor was overjoyed. His golden rod art became even more ferocious, and the rod shadows joined together like a golden tsunami. You're too slow. Die. Suddenly, the shining demon emperor appeared behind the golden-robed emperor, and his hideous black claw reached out. Poochie! The emperor's armor could not block it at all, and a huge hole appeared on it. Blood splashed everywhere. At this critical moment, the golden-robed emperor turned around and swung his rod at the shining demon emperor. Jumping back, the shining demon emperor frowned. He had wanted to pierce through the golden-robed emperor's body with this claw attack, but he did not expect the latter to react so quickly. Extending his right claw to his mouth, the flash demon monarch licked the blood on the tip of his claw. He grinned and said, "That's good. If you are too easy to kill, it will not be fun anymore." The golden-robed emperor's complexion didn't change. Inside his body, the undying power surged, instantly healing his injuries. At their realm, apart from the undying power of a seventh-step spirit body or higher, the so-called undying body was practically useless. Under the circumstances where the martial will was powerful enough, the undying body of a life and death king was simply a joke. This guy's movement technique is too powerful. The golden staff technique is ineffective against him. I can only use the sky-covering staff technique. However, I can't use it now. I have to use it the moment he lets down his guard and decide the outcome in one round. With that thought in mind, the golden-clad emperor wielded his staff with both hands and began to brandish it madly. Gradually, a golden circle enveloped the golden-robed emperor. Golden Supreme Unique Art Golden Circle. Hee, have you given up on attacking me? The flash demon monarch was slightly surprised, but he soon hid in the void again. Ding ding ding. In the next 15 minutes, the flash fiend emperor attacked the gold cloak emperor from all angles. But the gold cloak emperor's golden circle was flawless. Do you plan to waste time with me like this? The flash demon monarch no longer hid in the void and roared. The gold cloak emperor disdainfully said, "Break my defense if you have the ability. Then I'll show you." The flash demon monarch roared, and his entire body swelled from 1.5 meters to 3 meters. The muscles on his arms intertwined, making them look like iron. Flash demon heart-gouging scroll. Huff, huff. With his arms like an awl and his body like an awl, the flash demon monarch crazily spun toward the gold cloak emperor, with black lightning flickering on its tip. My flash demon heart-gouging scroll can create a black hole when cultivated to the extreme. Let's see how you block it. With a thought, the awl formed by the flash demon monarch struck the golden circle. Clang 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 clang. The golden circle's defense was terrifyingly strong, and no matter how hard the flash demon monarch tried, he couldn't break through it. Those in the spectator stands with good eyesight could already see that the golden circle could disperse its power. 10 layers of power would instantly disperse 90%. Unless the flash demon monarch's flash demon heart-gouging scroll's power was twice as strong, it would be impossible to break through it. Finally, the flash demon heart-gouging scroll's power was exhausted, and the flash demon monarch was bounced back by the golden circle's rebounding power. Here's my chance. The golden circle disappeared, and the gold cloak emperor took a step forward, using the covering heaven staff technique. Crackle! In an instant, no one knew how many times the gold cloak emperor had attacked. At first, the flash demon monarch could block tens of thousands of attacks, but after tens of thousands of attacks, his hands became numb. Countless staff shadows flew through the holes in his defense and landed on his body. In the end, the flash demon monarch was smashed into pieces, and his flesh was destroyed by the countless staff shadows. Returning to his seat, the gold cloak emperor smiled bitterly. It wasn't easy to win. It's good that you won. Yi Chen smiled. In the top 100 battles, the death rate suddenly increased. Those who could reach this stage all had some ability, and unless the gap was too big, they would not give up. For example, the gold cloak emperor and the flash demon monarch were on par, and the flash demon monarch was slightly stronger than the gold cloak emperor. But in the end, the gold cloak emperor killed the flash demon monarch with his wisdom and patience. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one was willing to give up. If they chose to give up when they met someone with similar strength, then they would not be able to become a supremacy for the rest of their lives. Those who could become a supremacy all had an indomitable fighting spirit and confidence. The purpose of the Shura realm's existence was to nurture supremacies in advance. One battle after another began and ended. In between, Su Jing gave up once. Her opponent was the black and white old man, who was no less dangerous than the yellow-robed old man. As for Yi Chen, he did not feel any pressure. In his eyes, the only people who could be considered opponents were the quasi-venerables and the yellow-robed old man. Covered by the red light column, Yi Chen entered the arena once again. His opponent was Tong Huang, ranked 15th in the quasi-venerables list, Tong Huang of the evil spirit race. Tong Huang was the elder brother of Evil Child King, whom Yi Chen had met in the high-rank hunting battlefield. Evil Child King and Tong Huang came from the Undying family. Every 100,000 years, a supremacy would appear in the family. The reason why the Undying family was so prosperous was because of the Undying evil art. This was a martial art that, when cultivated to the extreme, could not be killed. The most basic requirement for cultivating this martial art was to have an undying body, which was to become a life and death king. In addition, cultivating this evil martial art would make one younger and eventually look like a child. The younger one looked, the more profound one's strength would be. The Tong Huang in front of him looked no more than 10 years old, much younger than Evil Child King. He looked very strange. Not good. Yi Chen actually ran into Tong Huang. Some of the barbarian and giant race emperors were slightly worried. They had naturally heard of Yi Chen's name. He was indeed a genius that could not be seen even in 1,000,000 years. If he became a supremacy in the future, it would be beneficial to them as well. At least, it could offset the pressure from the demons. Chapter 1278. However, Tong Huang was indeed unkillable. Barbarian Emperor, who was ranked 6th on the quasi-venerables list, had once fought with Tong Huang fiercely. One was ranked 6th, while the other was ranked 15th. Tong Huang was naturally no match for Barbarian Emperor. However, even though Barbarian Emperor could beat Tong Huang into a pulp, he couldn't kill him. No matter how strong Yi Chen was, he was still a distance away from Man Emperor. The Undying evil art has not been trained to its peak, so there is a weakness. However, finding weaknesses is not my strong point, Man Emperor said slowly. On the side, Sacrifice Emperor, who was from the same race as Man Emperor and ranked 10th on the quasi-venerables list, said, finding weaknesses is a prerequisite. Tong Huang is still very strong. After so many years, no one knows what realm he has reached. If Yi Chen is at the same level as him, or even just a little bit stronger, it will be very dangerous. Hearing this, many of the barbarian race nodded. Against others, being a little bit stronger was a huge advantage. However, against Tong Huang, being a little bit stronger was not an advantage at all. Tong Huang's Undying evil art gave him endless chances to start over. For example, if the Shan Demon Emperor had the Undying evil art, then the Gold Robe Emperor would not have been able to kill the Shan Demon Emperor. In the arena, Tong Huang looked at Yi Chen with interest. Everyone says that you are a rare genius in the universe, and the demon's Shaman Demon Emperor has personally predicted your future. I, Tong Huang, do not believe it. When you die in my hands, everything will be clear. Tong Huang's weapon was a pair of yin-yang hooks, which looked like the tails of a scorpion. They were blue and obviously poisonous. Predicting the future? I don't believe it either. The future is in my hands. What I can predict is only the most likely possibility, Yi Chen said slowly. Oh, it seems like you know your limits. Tong Huang smiled. Yi Chen continued. So don't feel pressured. I can see that you are a little nervous. Yi Chen had mastered the Heart Sword realm, so he could see the changes in Tong Huang's heart clearly. Someone must have told him some information about himself, such as that mysterious evil sword emperor. You said I would be nervous? What a joke, what a joke. Tong Huang's short body suddenly leaped into the air, and his yin-yang hooks rained down from the sky. It was as if thousands of scorpions were trying to sting Yi Chen, and it was a sea of blue. Ding 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 ding. Yi Chen gently pulled out a sky-blue great sword. This was a top-grade Emperor-level sword Sky Dream Sword. Just like the top-grade Emperor-level armor he was wearing, it was given to him by a high-grade human being. The tip of the sword trembled, and a myriad of sword sparks sprayed out. Tong Huang's attack couldn't land, and it was blocked outside. Scorpion Dragon roams. Tong Huang's body spun, and the hook shadows created by the yin-yang hooks turned into a ferocious giant scorpion, which ran around Yi Chen, looking for an opportunity to attack. If Yi Chen's sword technique was even slightly careless, that scorpion tail would immediately sting Yi Chen's body. It should be known that the yin-yang hooks were extremely poisonous, and so were their attacks. Moreover, it was not an ordinary poison, but the yin-yang life-destroying poison that could instantly melt everything. Yi Chen's sword technique was always calm. It was like he was dancing with his sword, not fighting with his opponent. However, this seemingly leisurely sword dance made Tong Huang's attacks seamless. From time to time, some sword chi leaked out, passing through the gaps between Tong Huang's attacks and attacking Tong Huang's body, causing brilliant sparks. Yi Chen was only using an ordinary sword technique, which was not powerful enough. However, Tong Huang couldn't defend against this ordinary sword technique. If it weren't for the top-grade Emperor-level armor he was wearing, his armor would have been riddled with holes. In terms of changes, Tong Huang's unique move, Scorpion Dragon roams, was full of loopholes in Yi Chen's eyes. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Chen wanted to see his opponent's unique move and absorb its essence, Yi Chen wouldn't have given his opponent any chance. Battles could make people stronger, not only because of the battle itself, but also because of what you learned and what you comprehended during the battle. Such a terrifying sword technique cultivation. Every move and every movement, without any unnecessary details, goes straight to the essence. The Sword Emperor is indeed the Sword Emperor. He has already reached an unpredictable realm. The human camp was all overjoyed. The Sword Emperor? The evil Sword Emperor glanced at Yi Chen, then closed his eyes again. Yi Jianhuang stared at Yi Chen as he thought to himself, if it were not for the immortal evil art, Tong Huang might not even be in the top 20 of the list. Dealing with the Tong Huang would take so much effort. You think you are in control of the whole situation? What a joke. If you run into me, I will show you the sky-free sword art. Yi Jianhuang was very confident about the heavenly boundless sword art. It was a sword technique without any flaws. Even against the evil Sword Emperor's destiny evil sword, he had some confidence. His target this time was nothing else but the number 1 of the quasi-venerables list. No matter how thick Tong Huang's skin was, his ears were still red. Kacha! The yin-yang twin hooks merged together to form a strange sickle. The sickle spun, and countless threads shot out from it. At the end of these threads there was a small hook. Take this! Closing his body, he threw out a hook attack toward Yi Chen. Hiss, 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 hiss. The sound of a poisonous snake hissing could be heard. The sickle itself was fine, but there were too many small hooks attached to it. When it was swung, there were attacks everywhere, ever-changing. Yi Chen became slightly more serious. This was the first time he had encountered such a strange weapon. Together with Tong Huang's supreme hook art, it was indeed hard to defend. Of course, he didn't want to look too embarrassed. Raising the Sky Dream Sword horizontally, Yi Chen slashed out. Time and space were cut into thousands of pieces like cheese, and Tong Huang, who was within it, was fixed in place. Countless bloody lines appeared on his body, and pung! His body exploded, sending thousands of blood-colored cubes flying in all directions. Space-time sword art death cut. Haha, you can't kill me. Not far away, Tong Huang's laughter suddenly came. From nothing, an unharmed Tong Huang appeared. The undying evil art is indeed undying. Even such a powerful sword art can't kill him. Now Yi Chen is in trouble. For many people, it was the first time they had seen Tong Huang's undying evil art. They all gasped. Evil Sword Emperor, didn't you say that I would definitely die? Looks like you were wrong. Tong Huang, who had just come back to life, looked at the evil Sword Emperor and said confidently. Before, Tong Huang had asked the evil Sword Emperor what his chances of winning were if he were to fight against Yi Chen. The evil Sword Emperor had only said one sentence. No chance of winning. You will definitely die. This made Tong Huang very unhappy. At the same time, he started to feel nervous. The Evil Sword Emperor rarely said the wrong thing, but he was extremely confident in the undying evil art. After all, even the barbarian race's #1 barbarian king couldn't kill him. Nervousness and confidence mixed together, which was very contradictory. Now he could finally be sure that the Evil Sword Emperor was wrong. Yi Chen, it is your misfortune to have met me. I, Tong Huang, cannot be killed. No one below the Supremes can do anything to me. Tong Huang was no longer nervous. All he had was a smile on his face. Really? Then what do you think of this sword of mine? The dreamy bubbles danced in the air, exploding and reappearing again. There was no beginning, no end and no end. The bubbles reflected the inner changes of the child emperor, as well as the route of the immortal evil technique. Finally, it stopped at an extremely small black dot. Chapter 1279. When the bubbles finally disappeared, Tong Huang had already been pierced through like a beehive. In the next second, his body exploded and turned into dust. 5 elements sword art, omniscient nature. It's useless. The undying evil art has an undying source. As long as the source is not destroyed, the undying evil art will not be destroyed. And this source is hard to detect with soul power. Moreover, it will follow the circulation of the undying evil art and move irregularly. Wanting to find the source in an instant and destroy it is almost impossible. An old man from the evil spirit race smiled and shook his head. If the art of immortality was so easy to break, it wouldn't be called the art of immortality. Another person nodded. However, the result was out of everyone's expectation. Tong Huang did not revive again, and Yi Chen appeared in the audience. In other words, Tong Huang was indeed dead. The arena would not make a mistake. What? The art of immortality was broken? How is that possible? How did he do it? This, scary. Even the art of immortality was broken. What kind of sword art is that? Many people could not accept this result. They discussed among themselves in confusion. Idiot. Doubting you. Emperor Ning, who was ranked 16th on the quasi-venerable list, was full of disdain. He did not feel anything about Tong Huang's death. The Evil Sword Emperor, who had his eyes closed, said, "How many people can accept unfavorable comments? If he could, I would have a whole new level of respect for him." I didn't get a good look at that sword attack. Did you see anything? Emperor Ning asked. He has mastered the Heart Sword state. The Evil Sword Emperor only said one sentence. Heart Sword state. Emperor Ning was shocked. How could he not know that in order to break Tong Huang's art of immortality, the power of the heart was very important? Otherwise, the difficulty would be 10 times higher. Now this is interesting. If the opponent is too weak, you will not be interested. The Evil Sword Emperor revealed an evil smile. Next to Yi Chen, the golden-robed emperor was the same as Emperor Ning. He could not see how Yi Chen had broken the art of immortality. I just took care of his weakness a little. Omniscient nature was ever-changing. Even the enemy's transformation could not escape from it. With it, Yi Chen easily found the only weakness of the art of immortality and destroyed it. It should not be this easy, the gold-clad emperor muttered to himself. After breaking through the limit last time, Su Jing won consecutive battles. However, she was still too weak, and would still lose if she met a true peak expert. The one who defeated her was the 11th ranker on the quasi-venerable list, the giant race's split sovereign. Fortunately, both races were allies, so the split sovereign only defeated Su Jing, and did not kill her. Next, the golden-robed emperor also lost to the sacrificial emperor of the barbarian race, who was ranked 10th on the quasi-venerable ranking. On the other hand, the white-bone sword emperor was getting stronger with age. His luck was also very good. He had made it all the way until now. Of course, he had already forfeited twice. As for Yi Chen, there was nothing to worry about. The ghost race's ghost sovereign was ranked 17th on the quasi-venerate list. The evil spirit race's sovereign Ning was ranked 16th on the quasi-venerate list. The tail race's sovereign tail was ranked 14th on the quasi-venerate list. And the giant race's sovereign splitting race was ranked 11th on the quasi-venerate list. No matter who their opponent was, they could only lose against Yi Chen. Among them, the evil spirit race's sovereign Ning chose to forfeit. If he did not forfeit, he would definitely die at Yi Chen's hands. The human race and the evil spirit race were enemies. Yi Chen, long time no see. Yi Chen's opponent this time was the Quasi-Venerate list's Wolf Emperor, who was ranked 12th on the Quasi-Venerate list. You are. Yi Chen felt that the other party was very familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. The Wolf Emperor smiled. Why? Have you forgotten about me after we parted ways in Elysium? You're the parasitic demon on the Troll Emperor's body. Finally Yi Chen remembered. The main thing was that the Wolf Emperor in front of him and the parasitic demon from back then were similar in appearance. They both had wolf heads and human bodies, but they did not look alike at all. Their auras were also completely different. If one were to really compare, perhaps one would find some similarities if they observed carefully. However, so much time had passed, so it was normal that Yi Chen could not remember. After all, it was impossible for him to deeply imprint some unimportant things in his mind. After sighing, Yi Chen said, "Long time no see." Recalling the tragic war in Elysium, Yi Chen still felt very emotional. After not seeing each other for more than 500 years, this parasitic demon had actually become a quasi-venerate. It made people feel that the world was unpredictable. "Let's spar. You won't kill me, right?" The Wolf Emperor joked. Yi Chen said with a faint smile. "That's not necessarily true. You should just give up." "Haha. Even if I'm really killed by you, I'll accept it." The Wolf Emperor laughed loudly and attacked Yi Chen. The two of them exchanged blows, neither of them being too serious. The Wolf Emperor glanced at the long-haired demons and the evil Sword Emperor in the audience stand and said to Yi Chen, "I know that the strength you've shown is only a part of it, but I still have to remind you to be careful of the Sky Demon Emperor and the evil Sword Emperor. I once saw their battle in a secret realm. They are very, very strong, terrifyingly strong." "How strong?" Yi Chen asked curiously. "Stronger than everyone's imagination. I don't know how strong the Supremes are, but in my eyes they are the Supremes. Among the people here, the number of people who can withstand one move from them will not exceed the fingers on one hand, and that includes you." Yi Chen smiled. "Don't forget, the first in the quasi-venerate list is in our human race. With the strength of a martial emperor, you can at least compete with them." The first in the quasi-venerate list was a martial emperor from the human race. Since he dared to call himself martial emperor, he was naturally unimaginably strong. For thousands of years, this title had always been on his head. Martial emperors are naturally strong, but I believe in my premonition even more. Martial emperors are not a match for the Sky Demon Emperor and the Evil Sword Emperor. The Wolf Emperor looked serious. If they are really that strong, then it's not bad. That should be more interesting. Yi Chen said something that the Wolf Emperor did not expect. The Wolf Emperor choked, and after a while he said, "You are all lunatics. Perhaps only lunatics can reach such a realm." It was unknown if it was because Yi Chen had left a deep impression on him, but in the Wolf Emperor's heart, only Yi Chen had a glimmer of hope for the Sky Demon Emperor and the Evil Sword Emperor. He did not think much of the others. The two of them fought for an entire cup of tea's time before the battle ended. The Wolf Emperor was defeated. What surprised many people was that Yi Chen did not kill the Wolf Emperor. Yi Chen, this is. In the human race's camp, the martial emperor with a mountain-like aura frowned. In the evil spirit race's camp, the evil sword emperor opened his eyes and glanced at the Sky Demon Emperor. "I told you, you should have killed this parasite long ago." The long-haired demon smiled faintly. "Parasites also have their own reasons for existing. It won't be fun if we kill him. Are you afraid that he will reveal our secret?" "What's there to be afraid of? I just feel unhappy." "Don't worry, the fun has just begun. I'm a little excited." The Sky Demon Emperor glanced at Yi Chen and the martial emperor behind Yi Chen. A fiery light flashed in his eyes. "As my nourishment, enjoy every breath of air from now on." Chapter 1280. There were only 30 or 40 people left in the audience seats. There were 6 humans, namely Yi Chen, Yin Qingxian, the White Robe Emperor, the Green Robe Emperor, the White Bone Sword Emperor, and the martial emperor. Looking at the scene, there was no doubt that the human race had the most people. The other races only had 2 or 3 people left. Be careful. Yi Chen saw Yin Qingxian and the yellow-robed old man's gazes meet. The two of them had a premonition about the direction of fate. They were about to meet. As expected, the next match was between Yin Qingxian and the yellow-clothed old man. An old monster has encountered a young monster. The black and white old man chuckled. He personally hated the lich race. These people had a different way of looking at people. It was as if they knew everything and everyone was under their control. Although he was from the evil spirit race and allied with the demons, the black and white old man hoped that Yin Qingxian could deal with them. Of course, he knew how difficult it would be. As soon as the two of them clashed, they immediately released their respective domains. The yellow-robed elder's domain was the lich domain that contained time and space, while Yin Qingxuan's domain was a mysterious domain. The lich domain had many layers, and each layer had a different trajectory in space. The flow of time was also different. The slightest mistake could lead to a difference of thousands of kilometers. Even someone as strong as the purple-robed emperor could not hit the yellow-clad old man the first time he used his trump card. Later, the purple-robed emperor created 4 figures, wanting to destroy the lich domain and the yellow-clad old man in one fell swoop. Only then did he force the other party to attack. Yin Qingxuan's mystical domain was like a river that surged endlessly. It looked like it was surging with waves, but it was extremely calm inside. It contained mysteries, yin and yang, and it was constantly changing. The two domains collided, and in the blink of an eye, the domains canceled each other out, replenished each other, shook each other, devoured each other, fused with each other, mutated, and underwent countless transformations. From the outside, a distorted space-time light sphere had appeared with the two of them as the center. The time and space inside this space-time light sphere were circular and not connected to the outside world. Scenes appeared on the surface of the light sphere. There were scenes of Yin Qingxian and the yellow-clothed old man fighting, scenes of the yellow-clothed old man killing Yin Qingxian, and scenes of Yin Qingxian killing the yellow-clothed old man. It was just a short moment, but it felt like thousands of years had passed inside. Interesting. The celestial demon emperor's eyes lit up, as if he had seen something novel. The evil sword sovereign's eyes also widened, as if he had seen an incredible scene. What happened? How miraculous! Why do I feel that this space-time light sphere is even more miraculous than the supreme martial skills of a supreme being? This woman is not simple. This is the first time I've seen a domain as profound as the lich's domain. The celestial demon emperor and the evil sword emperor could understand a little, but the others were confused. Is it a coincidence that the time and space yin and yang profound meanings fused together? Yi Chen took a deep breath. The shaman demon emperor's domain contained the time and space profound, while Yin Qingxuan's domain contained the yin and yang profound. For some reason, the two domains were mutually exclusive and complementing each other, fusing together to a certain extent. Yi Chen didn't know how powerful the combination of the time and space profound would be. He only knew that the space-time light sphere was in a state of absolute balance. Not to mention them, even an ordinary supreme being wouldn't be able to break through it, because the time and space inside had already lost connection with this world. For example, a supreme being could only distort time and space, but they couldn't stop it. When two supreme beings fought, they would distort time and space, and there was a chance of creating a space-time circle. Time would no longer advance in a straight line, but would circulate endlessly, repeating endlessly. It was equivalent to two semicircles fusing together. However, the chance was so low that it was negligible. The shaman demon emperor and Yin Qingxian both walked the path of fate, and they had something in common. Perhaps this was the main reason for the birth of the space-time light sphere. Otherwise, there was no other explanation. Boom! Suddenly, the space-time light sphere exploded, and the two figures were sent flying. The yellow-robed elder roared at the sky. I lost in terms of potential. Is this fate? Swish! The yellow-robed elder turned into sand and disappeared with the wind. Yin Qingxian spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face turned pale. It was very dangerous this time. In terms of strength, she was much weaker than the yellow-robed elder. The reason why she didn't give up was because she had a premonition that she wouldn't die. What happened next made her feel the impermanence of fate. In the space-time light sphere, time circulated endlessly. It seemed to be repeating, but every time it repeated, thousands of years had passed. In the first repetition, Yin Qingxian was killed by the yellow-robed elder, but after the repetition, Yin Qingxian revived again. Life and death were no longer under her control, and it was controlled by the repetition of time and space. However, compared to the yellow-robed elder, Yin Qingxian had a huge advantage, and that was her youth and potential. The yellow-robed elder's thousands of years of improvement couldn't compare to Yin Qingxuan's hundreds of years of improvement. At the beginning, Yin Qingxian wasn't the yellow-robed elder's opponent, but gradually, she caught up and was on par with the yellow-robed elder. Then, she surpassed him, and when the gap reached a certain level, the balance of the space-time light sphere was broken. The yellow-robed elder who came out of the space-time light sphere had actually died, but because the outside world had started to take over their lives, it was delayed for a moment. Yin Qingxian spat out a mouthful of blood. It was just a backlash, and most of it had been absorbed by her inside the space-time light sphere. The heavenly Tao doesn't have a fixed number. I, who was inside the space-time light sphere, have become the supremacy, but nothing has changed in reality. Past, present, and future. What is the connection between them? Yin Qingxian, who had returned to her seat, was in deep thought. Yi Chen didn't disturb Yin Qingxian. He didn't know what had happened inside the space-time light sphere, but this was the best outcome. Maybe only the true gods are omniscient and omnipotent. After the battle between Yin Qingxian and the yellow-robed elder ended, the next few battles were dull, until this battle began. Yi Chen versus Yi Jianhuang. Although Yi Jianhuang was only ranked 13th on the quasi-venerate ranking, no one dared to underestimate him. He had already defeated the spirit race's Jade Spirit Emperor, who was ranked 9th on the quasi-venerate ranking, the Yiksha race's Mountain Emperor, who was ranked 7th on the quasi-venerate ranking, and the Barbarian race's Barbarian Emperor, who was ranked 6th on the quasi-venerate ranking. His Heavenless Freedom Sword technique had only appeared once, and it was used to deal with the Barbarian race's Barbarian Emperor. Barbarian Emperor's outcome was naturally death, and up until now, Yi Chen had won consecutive battles. No one had been able to force him to use his trump card, Heavenless Sword Domain. Yi Jianhuang murmured. Boom! The pitch-black sword domain spread out at the speed of light. It was pure black, without a trace of other colors. Yi Jianhuang, who was within the sword domain, had long since disappeared. What, the middle stage of the 8th level of sword domain? How is this possible? The white bone sword emperor, who was at death's door, was dumbfounded. 360 years ago, his white bone sword domain had reached the early stage of the 8th level, and he had thought that he could look down on all the sovereigns of the sword Dao in the world. However, he hadn't expected that Yi Chen's sword domain was no weaker than his, and it was even complemented by sword Yuan. 360 years had passed, and his white bone sword domain was still at the early stage of the 8th level. There was no improvement at all. This wasn't because he didn't have any potential, but mainly because the sword domain was harder to improve as one progressed. Most sovereigns of the sword Dao were stuck at the peak of the 8th level. At the 8th level of the sword domain, no matter how shocking one's talent was, it would take tens of thousands of years just to improve a little, let alone a minor realm. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.